let's do a quick speed calculation. Let's imagine that I'm going to drive from Tupelo, Mississippi. I'm going to mark that as a T. I'm going to drive to Fulton, Mississippi. The distance between the two places is about 25 miles. So 25 miles from Tupelo to Fulton. And of course I drive a little Prius, so I don't drive very fast. It takes me about a half an hour to get from Tupelo to Fulton. So 25 miles, and I make it in a half an hour. So what's my speed? Well, I take my distance, 25 miles, and I divide by my time. A half an hour, 0.5 hours. And if you do the math here, you wind up with 50 miles per hour. That's my average speed for my trip. Now, that was a one-way trip. Now, can you imagine, instead of me doing a one-way trip, what if I did a round trip? What if I went from Tupelo and came back immediately back to Tupelo? So I go to from Tupelo to Fulton, and then immediately turn around, come back to Tupelo. What's my distance covered there? That would be 50 miles, wouldn't it be? So 50 miles. And how long would it take me? Well, if it takes me a half an hour to go from Tupelo to Fulton, I would expect that it would take me another half an hour to get back from Fulton to Tupelo. So therefore, 50 miles divided by 1 hour, which also turns out to be an average speed of 50 miles per hour. Now notice, was I always going 50 miles per hour? No. Hopefully not through my neighborhood. If I drove 50 miles per hour through my neighborhood, some of those walkers, those little kids would wind up being hood ornaments. So I don't go that fast through my neighborhood. Out on Highway 78, I'm not going 50 miles per hour either. Otherwise, I would wind up being a hood ornament because people go flying by at 80. So notice that by dividing my total distance divided by my total time, that just gives me an average speed. My speedometer was not always on 50 miles per hour. Sometimes it was below, sometimes it was above, but on average, it was around 50 miles per hour. My instantaneous speed is when I'm out there on Highway 78 and I'm going 80 miles per hour and I see a cop in the median. And I panic and I look down at my speedometer and I see 80. That's my instantaneous speed. That's my speed at that instant. It's now my average speed. My average speed is the total distance divided by the total time. Now let me take another second here and talk about velocity, because velocity, unlike speed, remember speed is distance, we call that little d, divided by time. Velocity, average velocity, and quite often you'll see it written with a little hat over the top of it to give you average, just like average speed would be with a S with a little hat over it. Average velocity is displacement, capital D, divided by time. So let's take, for example, my drive from Tupelo to Fulton. What's my displacement? I start in Tupelo. I wind up 25 miles from where I started, but 25 miles east, if you know your directions. So therefore, my velocity going to Fulton would be 50 miles per hour east. Notice the velocity has a speed as well as a direction. It's another vector quantity. If I wanted to get my velocity from Fulton to Tupelo one way, it would be 25 miles west in a half an hour. That would be 50 miles per hour west would be my average velocity. If I wanted to calculate my average velocity for the round trip, test yourself. What's my displacement? If I leave my driveway, go to Fulton, and come back to my driveway, what's my displacement? How does my final position compare to my initial position? I haven't moved. Right? My final position is the same as my initial position. Therefore, my displacement in that case would be 0. And sure, it took me an hour, but I came back to where I started, and therefore my average velocity for the round trip would be 0 miles per hour. So that's a very important distinction between average velocity and average speed.